All right. Well, it's recording. So, hey, Luis, it's good to see you again and have a good conversation. And I think the last time we were having a discussion, we were just really talking about things that were interesting to us. I'm trying to make a little bit more structure with the interviews that I have now. And
Uh,
the topics of today's discussion will be with Jan 6. And I was like wanting to entertain, two pros, two cons with both Trump and Biden. And what do you consider to be our country's biggest obstacles? It could be like with social, societal issues, or if you want to discuss like systemic issues, that's usually what I focus on. But, there's some issues with the culture that we probably discuss as well. And anything else you would like to talk, I always leave that open to my guests as well. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what's your political ideology so people get to know who you are, and I'll let you go ahead.
hey everybody, Luis Ruiz back again. Thank you, Emilio, for hosting the space and trying to have civil discord. I think it's something that's sorely lacking in today's hyper partisan, individualized world. And so, just want to say, I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would say my political philosophy. I mean, there's several words that I could use, but the one that I think today makes most sense to me is I would say I'm a humanist. In contrast to a transhumanist, I would say I'm a nationalist. In contrast to a globalist, um, constitutionalist, all the way down to I if I had, I mean, certainly on the right, I not have ever never been part of either the Democrat or the Republican Party, but I can tell you that I'm rooting for the Republicans in Congress right now, and hoping that we will get a Republican president in 2024. But I mean, the main thing today, as an individual, I think that really encapsulates my political philosophy is I'm a humanist. Yep.
Cool.
I how about you? Tell me like.
Yeah. And that, I mean, like you, I had to like really dive deep. And I think not just me or you, a lot of people are engaging more politically because it wasn't the norm back in the day to talk about your politics. So I think it's safe to say everyone's trying to figure out where they stand politically these days. And thanks to social media, we're able to have platforms. I mean, here I am talking to you, and you're in California, I'm in Texas. I can just go
Yeah.
ahead and talk to somebody from Mississippi and have a good conversation with them. And I think that's awesome. But through all that, we're trying to figure stuff out. And I think the best way to do that is kind of like together, like you mentioned. And that was like one of the other things I really agreed with you when you were doing your Jan 6 investigation and all that. You were saying you were worried about that rhetoric and how people are going to be labeled. And that's a legitimate concern to have. So me, I try to make my description of my politics very simple. I mean, I believe in a mixed economy. I recognize our country has capitalistic natures to it, which I value. And also that we have some areas where we allow the government to control certain topics of our governing. And that's something we've always had. And even when we were considered the world power, the influential beacon of society, we were a mixed economy. And then, when we have those conversations of what's better with Republican and Democrat, I can point out examples of when Republicans were awesome and also Democrats when they were doing the good things that I like to see. And as far as like, I can separate my politics from what I do at my home. And I think my criticism for people that are more right-leaning, they allow how they govern in their private lives to govern outside. And I just don't know if that's a realistic way to govern because we're so diverse, so many religions, so many lifestyles. And I think the best way to influence people, if you're right leaning, is by example, because people will look at that and they'll like, you know what, that's a cool conservative. I respect that guy. And I don't think there's going to be that animosity that you're going to be judged or challenged because you look different or you do different things. Because, I think we had some back and forth and I'm like, I'm a straight dude, but who am I going to lecture somebody that's not straight? And I'm not going to get them to sign on to Team Straight Dude if I'm going to dog them, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think you realize that too, because like you said, we're both trying to model that kind of conversation. And that's why I thank you for coming on again. And we're going to go ahead and continue that. So I think we can go ahead and start off with the January 6th, because I think you did a lot of good things as far as like people don't go and ask questions. That's good. I mean, rather if people agree with you or not, you're providing that information and people can make their own judgment. So I'll go ahead and let you discuss what you had to say about that.
Well, if I may ask, let me ask you a few questions about
Sure.
what you think are January the 6th. Would you consider that to be an insurrection?
I consider it people that are in power utilizing other people as pawns to push and maintain their power. I mean, it's a gray area because there's people that were innocent. They're probably treated too harshly, but they broke the law. So, people have to look at it in an objective manner because you don't want to give anyone the pathway to do what they did, regardless if they were peaceful or not. If you interrupt lawmakers in session, that's a federal crime. Now, as far as like how severe they should have been punished, I mean, you could thank George Bush, you could thank Barack Obama, you could thank Trump for just adding the ability for the government to be as powerful as it is. You had the Patriot Act that allowed people to just get spied upon, and then the Defense Act of 2012 they allow you to be tossed into Guantanamo Bay if you're suspected as a terrorist. And then Trump wanted to make you into a financial terrorist if you were advocating for your First Amendment. So, I don't know. I mean, it just, I don't really know enough because that stuff to me is like a distraction. I'm more focused on systemic issues, and I just see people throwing a fit, and I'm just like, okay, people were throwing a fit when Clinton lost, people were throwing a fit when Trump lost, and then it's just cringe behavior, and people don't even know what they're talking about. They're just emotional. But when you bust into the Capitol, it's just like, ugh.
Tell me about how you felt when you were watching it on TV. Like, what were your thoughts and
I'll tell you exactly. Somebody was really crazy and it's like, oh, I can't believe what's happening. I was like, yeah, nothing's going to happen. It wasn't an issue to me. And then when I see people online talking about it, I was like, okay, now I guess it's an issue. And then when I see how people were making defense for the people that were going in, they're like, well, they're just opening the door. They're just have a smile on their face. And I was like, well, I was in law enforcement. They're corralling them in. They're just letting them go into this. And they're going to be in a place where there's cameras everywhere. It's like they're going to incriminate themselves. Come on in. So just like they were herded like cattle. And,
interesting.
And then the thing is, it's like, because when you're outnumbered, are you going to take all the whole crowd? You're going to lose, So, most of those people are thinking, they're like, yeah, but there were some people that were climbing the fence, vandalizing. I mean, they're committing crimes. So I'm very objective, dude. If you do something that's against the law, you go to jail. And then now that you're doing it in a place where it's going to be a federal offense, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. I mean, it's like if you commit a crime on an airplane, it's a federal offense. You just being ignorant of the law, regardless if you're Antifa or if you're MAGA, we got to keep it even, So I was very objective, because I'm in Texas. I'm around people that like Trump. What, am I going to hate everybody I'm around? I mean, no, it's not a realistic mentality, and it's not healthy. So that's why another incentive of me just doing what I do to talk to people. So like that question, I mean, my initial response was just to be indifferent. I wanted to know more information. I just looked at them. I was like, they look like a bunch of idiots. It's that guy in the Buffalo thing. I was like, okay, that guy's.
Oh wow, yeah. But so you felt like I was really interested in that. You said you kind of said like, oh, they're corralling them. You could feel like law enforcement was maybe
Well, that's what they do to control rioters. They make sure they go into a specific area where they could just de-escalate the situation. I mean, there's a lot of people that were pissed. They were saying, hang Mike Pence. I mean, they were even turning against their own party. So there was instability. And then I blame people that were in power from both sides. These are people that are being called deplorables. You're idiots. And then on top of that, you're getting used by the GOP to say, oh, it was rigged. And I'm like, well, I don't know. You guys lost. You guys have bad ideas that poll horribly. I mean, that's just a losing remedy. I mean, so I don't know. It didn't make sense to me to how they were just trying to crap all over democracy, because if you look at every polls of which policies poll well, the Republicans do pretty bad. They lost in the midterms to Sleepy Joe Biden. That says more about your party, not your, but I'm just saying the opposing party than you lost to Sleepy Joe Biden. I mean, people don't really care for Joe Biden. They voted for him because they didn't like your candidate. I mean, Joe Biden's not going to throw a rally. People aren't going to show up. I voted for him.
What network were you watching? on? Like did like if I see something going on, like it could be anything. Like not gonna go on tangent, but like when the Buffalo Bills player, when he fell out on the field, I go through and I'll see
Mhm.
what different people are saying. Did you watch it all on one station on the internet, Twitter? How'd you see it unfold? How are you consuming this in real time?
Well, my news consumption's really to talk. I mean, to watch people that
Well,
debate.
but January the 6th, though, how are you consuming January the 6th as it was happening?
Um, I look at I get all my news from online. I don't really watch I don't have cable, dude. So I don't watch
Okay.
CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't watch Fox. I have some YouTube content creators that I like to watch, and they're pretty good at talking to conservatives. And they have, I mean,
Yeah.
they're not as civil as I am, but I get to see people argue about it. So I think I get more value from actual regular people discussing it and holding each other accountable versus watching the news and just seeing people preach to the choir. Of
Okay.
course, Fox is going to have their spin, and if I do see clips of the media on YouTube, I'll just okay. I'm going to have my biases checked. If I see something that's more conservative, I'll be like more tempted to fact check them, and if they're right, it stands more to align with them. I was like, all right, the Fox is right about that, and that's why I say when you made your video, I saw a lot of things that I could take away that are like legitimate concerns. So that's how I approach everything. I mean, you and I are probably on the polar opposite of the spectrum, but yet I could find some good points that you make. So there's evidence of how
Yeah.
I consume my media.
Great. Well, I was there, so I didn't have a chance to, actually watch it because I was there at the moment. But like something like that, I would usually watch probably on like maybe whether it's Fox, CNN, one of the majors, only because I would expect them to have multiple cameras,
Yeah, I saw a lot of
on the
footage.
scene. Like really nice, like they have zoom lenses, so really capturing the action, which is what they should be doing. And I'm yeah, I mean, I'd maybe be watched if I was at home watching it. I'd maybe be doing that, and then also like on Twitter, maybe. Do you know who BG on the scene is? Brian or Guden? This guy, he's always embedded in all the Antifa videos. I'm sorry, Antifa like riots. He was there, always all on the scene. Like he was on the ground during the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis. Yeah, it's just kind of well known. Anyhow, I'm saying that just because I think it how you consume the event will always kind of picture that. Some people on some pundits I heard say that this was worse than Pearl Harbor. This was worse than 9/11. I'm glad that I love seeing that look on your face because I think it's hogwash really, and a lot of times you have these major media outlets that really insult their viewers. One, there's that element, but two, um, I think a lot of people allow themselves to be willingly misled.
Well, not
Which
misled, just allowing themselves to get pissed off without thinking critically about the situation. I mean, I
Yeah.
could see how they would make that comparison because it's the first time we've ever had a coup implemented in our government. So that's kind of a big deal. And
do you think it's a coup though? Would
mhm,
you call it a coup?
I mean, I'm just using that in a general term. I don't know how to specifically call it. So I'll be careful with my language, but it's people coming into our place of leadership looking for politicians. And what would have happened if they would have got a hold of some of them? Even people in the Republican Party. It was kind of like people were actually hunting down politicians too from both sides because they're pissed, and when you let people that are emotional, it's hard to predict to see what's going to happen, so you can't say one way or the other, so you got to be careful.
Okay. So, if you don't mind, like I do want to talk about this. There's a lot of different reasons why I think it's a good topic to discuss. And I'm kind of getting close to the end of the cycle here with all of this. Like the January the 6th Commission
Mm-hmm.
recently wrapped up. They produced their report. Um, we've now with the Twitter files. We've been seeing a lot of the back end of how the government is working to suppress speech, silence citizens. Obviously, we have a constitution in the United States, and they can't do it directly. So the Twitter files has been really interesting to see how they do it on the back end.
Mhm.
Government often works through proxies. Right? It's kind of like the same thing going back to the Iraq War. You had Blackwater. That's when you really started to hear about them. They were private contractors doing military missions, and they were found to be siphoning off large quantities of money, etc. It's a fascinating time. Before I really launch into January the 6th, it's a fascinating time to be alive right now because you have all of these social media platforms that exist. We're starting now to learn a lot more about the way that they work in the background. I mean, our behavior has been modified and influenced for the past 10 years. And now, like, that we can see it, it's kind of just where a
Well,
lot of
could you
people,
give me an example of how it's been modified? I'm just kind of curious because that's like an overgeneralization that I don't make on January 6th, but you're making it on an entire, global or the US spectrum. So in what way are we being modified? I'm just curious.
well, okay, so let's just say this. There's we can talk about the presidential election of 2020, and you had the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, which at that point in time came out just before the elections. Most people now, when polled about it, said that they would have changed their vote away from Biden if they knew about that.
Well, I
But
mean, the
what
same could be said about Trump. He wasn't very transparent with stuff that we found out about him as well. I mean, there's a lot of Republicans with buyer's remorse voting for Trump.
Well, sure, but what we had here was the it's an extraordinary circumstance here where we
It's
had
nepotism. It's the
the
same old
intelligence
thing
we had.
that all people do in power.
But what you're seeing, like, look, I'll tell you, I used to be, I when I was in college, I was studying to be a journalist. I worked in
Mhm.
economic development. I saw I guess, the incestuous relationship between corporations, government, and the media, and how a lot of things are presented to the public a lot differently. And it will go into why, you know, things turned out in respect to January the 6th, why things turned out the way they did for me personally.
Yeah, that's cool.
As far as I know, I'm the only person so far that has been cleared by the FBI, um, for being there. Um, and I can tell you that being on the ground that day, it was a very emotionally charged time.
I
I
imagine.
too could have gotten carried away and been doing a lot of stupid
Get
things.
caught in, yeah. I mean, you got to watch yourself. I mean, the ignorance of the law, that's why they say that. I mean, it makes you think and not get over emotional because, like you said, you can do stupid things. And unfortunately, the consequences are just going to weigh heavier if you're doing a federal, if you have federal implications against you. So,
Sure. Well, look, I'll give you a more clear-cut example so we can kind of come into how our
sure.
behavior is modified by the media and social media. Ivermectin. Okay, ivermectin, it can be used as a prophylactic against COVID-19. It can be used to treat an ongoing a case that's already started. That information was completely censored from the public, and as a result, a lot of people only turn to the vaccine. I mean, we could talk about that for
No,
hours.
I
That
agree. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong there, but that's
we had
also
Congress at the same time as publicly the CDC, FDA was telling people don't take ivermectin. There was like 200 Congress people that were being treated silently by a doctor. To me, that's criminal. That's especially when seen in light of mandates. I mean, for goodness sake, people all over lost their jobs, and again,
well, I mean,
but
I could make a logical justification for that. I mean, one, they have privilege. We don't. Not every American has insurance or healthcare, access to healthcare. And just like ivermectin, I mean, just like the vaccine, ivermectin has possible side effects too. So they developed an infrastructure to handle any side effects that were going to probably come from the vaccine. Nothing's 100%, everyone knows the risk when you take any kind of medication. They could have been more transparent with the mask. They did a lot of bad things as far as like trying to push the vaccine on people. And, you know, me being from Texas, I'm a little bit biased because we didn't have like mandatory shutdowns for businesses. And what's interesting, you know, I think people on the right like to just assume that it's left people that are just like advocating for businesses closing down. But libertarians, they believe in like the business can do whatever they want. You know, it's their right. Because I think people on the right, they're like, well, my free speech. It's like, well, businesses have constitutional rights too, to protect their financial interests, to protect their employees. So that was the conflict I feel that most people had misconceptions over. And I don't think like the media from the right or the left were honest about that. It's business rights, states' rights. I mean, people were just arguing whose rights should be prioritized without even knowing the definition of what the rights are. And that's what's frustrating to me, because I'm just like, I was an essential worker and I knew I was needed in my position. I wasn't scared. I'm healthy. So I was like, okay, whatever. But I'll wear a mask. I'll social distance. So any old ladies around me won't be worried, because anxiety was one of the top three comorbidities for COVID. So I'm just like, okay, I'm going to commit myself to a year. So I made my own rubric. I didn't listen to the media. I was like, hey, I'll keep my mask for a year. I'll social distance. And then when it's over, you know what? I'll just leave it in God's hands. If I get COVID, I get it. And as soon as I took the mask off, my whole family got COVID. It didn't hit us hard. We were all vaccinated. So, I mean, hey, I don't really have an opinion. I don't like the idea of mandates, but I do respect if a business wants to push it. Now, if it's a federal mandate, I'll be like, let the states do it.
Early on, would you have considered using ivermectin, which it's very widely available. It's so easy to make. I mean,
I don't even take the flu vaccine, Luis. So, I mean, I was not ever a big advocate of
but you did take this COVID-19 one. So what was different?
I'll tell you. Well, for one, I'm a typical dude. I never go to the doctor. It's because of my wife. And it's not because of my wife, like being the stereotypical whiny person. No, because she's not from this country. She's from Iran. So I actually saw the COVID storm coming. I didn't see it or feel it, but she did, because in Iran, it came before it came to the United States, and people were dropping over there like flies. And she was like saying, you really need to start putting a mask on. I was like, what? It's like, I'm not putting no mask. She said, no, serious. I mean, right now in Iran, there's a lot of people getting sick. There's people dying, and we had family that died. So I'm just like, okay, fine. I'll go ahead and put a mask on, whatever. So you won't worry. So sure enough, it started coming to the United States. I was like, whoa. And I have a Marine buddy that works in the financial sector. And we were talking amongst friends, and one of my right-leaning friends was like, yeah, man, the Wuhan virus, it'll be gone soon. He's like, dude, I don't think so. So these are people I respect. We're having these conversations that we're able to see it coming through the storm of the financial world, and also in other countries that had nothing to do with our media. And then plus I started looking at what was happening in India too. They weren't able to bury the people that were dying. They were literally burning corpse in front of hotels. So, and then the farmers were starting to revolt against the government. I mean, you just saw instabilities around the whole world because of COVID. And COVID by itself is not deadly. And I understood that from the very start. And another thing I understood is like, yeah, the vaccine's new. So I was not one of the first people to say, hey, sign me up. But when I started seeing all the rich people park their yachts in the middle of the ocean to stay away from all of us, that made me start to think. And then there were some stories of like people that were the elite class jumping the line to get their vaccine. After that, I started to reconsider. I was like, okay, I'll get the vaccine. And I heard people that got it. I personally knew it, and I didn't see anything. I've never seen anybody die from the vaccine. So I was like, okay, it met my rubric. I'll get it. We'll see.
So it was kind of like, at first you waited out, just kind of watched on the sidelines, then started seeing it. If I want to make sure I'm hearing right, and then like some elite people were like getting it, and you saw that they actually like panic buyed it, right? And that kind of made a sense of legitimacy to you. Then you saw other influencers, and eventually you yourself took it as well.
Well, I mean, like not just elite people getting it, poor people got it and they died in other countries, Brazil, Colombia, Iran, and China too. So in India. So, I mean, it wasn't just people in power. They just saw what was happening to the poor folks and they separated themselves from all that.
Yeah. definitely. Yeah, these were interesting times. I think fear definitely.
I wouldn't say it's fear on my end; it's vigilance.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, vigilance for sure. But I mean, like the people that are getting in boats and hanging out in the ocean away from the rest of us.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think what people don't really think enough about is how media is shaped, news is shaped, how
I think they do, though, Luis. If you look at the poll of the credibility of our media, it's at an all-time low. So I don't know how you're making that claim when if you just they're losing ratings right now. The Fox News is number one. So if you want to talk about media, they're Tucker Carlson and Fox News are ranked supreme.
they Tucker Carlson, I think, is an outlier, gut filled as well. But what Fox News does is they're part of this Overton window where like they represent the very end of what's acceptable political dialogue. On the right, there's on the left. Left, you can apparently you can just there is no boundary to the left Overton window. Fox News is the right boundary to the Overton window. But like for example, with um when talking about the 2020 election, it was Fox News's calling of Biden, Arizona for Biden, that really kind of cemented the deal. And that's when it was like, okay, this is a done deal. He was projected. And I think the fact that Fox News did that gave him a real big sense of credibility. I think that's,
Well,
I
just for,
think,
I don't want to interrupt you, but we're just going to go ahead. Everything we're saying, it ties in to January 6th because we both agree that the media has made us like mislead us and it adds to the
sure.
problems we have. And you're giving me examples of how they've done it in the past. So it's still relevant to the
That
conversation. Just want to keep that in mind.
it was because so January the 6th, I think, was like one of many
A cherry on top.
psychological operations that has been execute or that has been inflicted upon the American populace.
That's the thing where you and I are probably going to differ again. I mean, whose fault is that? That's our fault. I take self accountability. If you want to go ahead and rely on people that you already know that are not believable, like the media, most people on the right, most people on the left, and then you're one of those people, like on my Facebook, I have a lot of family members, they just send memes that's the only way you get your information, by political memes. I mean, of course, you're not going to be civil or level-headed. You're going to be mad at the other side, regardless of which side you're in. So you have to do something more as a citizen of this country to get engaged. And I think I want to normalize talking to each other, and I think people are lazy and they just want what's easy. It's easier to pick a team instead of actually reading policy. It's easy to pick a team rather than talking to somebody and justifying your beliefs. So I don't really like to blame politicians as much. That's why I like to hold us accountable. What about we the people? I mean, we could talk all day you can't expect President Trump to see eye to eye to you. He's been a billionaire. He's not going to be able to relate. Same thing with Biden. It's been in politics his whole life. He's never had a real job. He's not going to be able to see things your way. So the only way to fight and combat that is to agree on things together. And so much money has been invested to tear us apart. So I think the most effective way to beat the elite is just to unite.
Absolutely. So, and with regards to solutions, some of the things I'd like to propose, we can rail all day about the media and it lies and
I agree,
et cetera, et cetera. But I'll tell you, as the mainstream media continues to suffer this decline in both trust, which then equals into ratings, their lifeline that keeps them in the game is government funding. Government funding of media in the United States, in Canada, it's a huge problem. And I
what
think
government funds? I mean, CNN's getting funded by the government. I mean, I've always figured they were getting funded by big pharma, like corporate interests. I've
sure.
never.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this. The COVID-19 vaccine and its distribution, that was a Department of Defense operation.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people will really realize that,
Mhm.
but the
No,
Department of
I when I got my vaccine, I saw a lot of military personnel out there. And to be honest, I think the reason they push COVID vaccine so much on the media is for logistical reasons. Because when you have to like take care of a world pandemic, you have to have some kind of measures to make sure, I mean, to treat us like cattle, unfortunately. I mean, people don't like the way it looked and sounded, but that was the most efficient way to make sure. I mean, I grew up in a rural area. I mean, we're not going to want to vaccine our cattle to make them die. And it doesn't make sense with this to me to like, oh, they're trying to control the population. Well, then why are they controlling the people, the population of the ones that are willing to obey? I mean, that wouldn't seem like the demographic that you would want to kill off. So that's
well, there's a larger conversation to be had here. Where I started at the beginning with talking about being a humanist rather than a transhumanist.
mhm.
One of the things I think is different between a humanist, the major difference between a humanist and a transhumanist is that humanists don't buy into this thought of eugenics. Transhumanists do. There is a we're right now going through, it's called the fourth industrial revolution. We're
The
moving past,
transitional period, yeah.
absolutely. But with that, there is, and it's you I'll find it here in a second. There is a United States memorandum. It was written by Henry Kissinger that basically, since 1976, the global depopulation has been one of our government's tenets of operation. It's one of their goals to reduce the worldwide population. And I think that if your goal is to reduce the global population, at that point, you're not going to make that much of a difference. That's just the goal. And however you can get to that point A to point B the fastest is what drives a lot of these decisions. I mean, and it's multiple fronts. I mean, you could see what the US government has been doing in terms of wars in Libya, Syria. I mean, we've been in nonstop conflict since that time. That's reducing the global population. Um, you had vaccination I mean, we can go on and on.
No,
But
yeah, sure. But
so
let's go ahead and refocus on January 6th. But like I said, I think we are relevantly on topic because we're
sure.
giving examples of how the media has been training us to turn against each other. And January 6th was like the cherry on top. So
So I don't understand. Go with regard to January the 6th. I still don't understand. I where Trump lies in all of this, but
well,
the
it's all his tweets by downplaying the democracy. I mean, he's kind of like a cheerleader for those people. And the thing is, on to for his side, he was willing to go with the people that were going to go to the Capitol. That's what like the reports sound. He was really mad in his limousine that they weren't allowing him to accompany his people. But
yep.
I mean, but to me, when you see people going, it's like a common sense thing. They're going to do dumb things. So it's just like, why would you incentivize them? I mean, if I was Trump with the ego I had, I guess that was the issue. He had an ego. If he would have just chilled out and just said, hey, we'll get him next time around, he would have built a bigger MAGA by showing that ounce of humility and also just disproving his opposition to saying he could be civil. And he's like, next time we're going to come back bigger, better, and stronger. You know what? But he didn't choose that route. He
Well,
pushed the vision.
I'll tell you, I think the United States will be really fortunate to outlive 4 years of a Biden presidency. I think
How
right
so?
now,
What's wrong with Biden? I'm just curious. Now,
everything. Like, look, this we've had a unmitigated stream of immigrants coming in from a lot of countries, and I'm going to
okay,
tell you,
we can address that too. I mean, but go ahead. I'll let you go ahead
sure.
and talk about it.
There's good people. I personally spent time when I was in El Paso last, and I can tell you absolutely no question about it. There's some good people that are coming over. There's a lot of like not so good people that are coming over,
Mhm.
and they're not going to make this country better. They're not here to do anything productive. So nothing. I have some other thoughts and theories
But
about.
for the record, I named some good things about Trump. Have you named? You said everything's bad about Biden.
There's nothing. No, I would. Well,
That's part of one of the topics. That's why I was just giving you a heads up.
as far as Biden, there's nothing. I think that he was installed in order to weaken this country to the point where either we won't recover or we will go into a civil war. I
We
sincerely
have
think.
recovered financially. We've recovered with our alliances around the world. I mean, there's a lot of criticism to have with Biden. I'm not a big
The
Biden
dollar
fan
has lost in the
because
last
we
two
had a
years.
world pandemic. Everyone's currency went down to crapper.
Russia's currency is stronger than ever. The whole BRICS, you know what, the dollar is about to lose its reserve status. BRICS right now, and BRICS is even expanded. There's other countries now that want to be part of BRICS. We're the torch has been passed. You know, we might not see it right now in reality, but we're not the global hegemon. And to a certain degree, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think definitely the United States as a government has wielded an ungodly amount of influence over a lot of other countries' affairs. But
I agree.
the way that the United States is being unwound right now, it's not for good. It's absolutely not for good. We are giving all of our money to Ukraine. We're giving not just our money, we're giving all of war resources like um our ammunition. I mean, it's just it's free for all. There's absolutely no accounting. And
Well, you know, that's what made us the powerhouse when we stayed neutral in World War II, I believe. And that's how we became all who we are.
with regards to January the 6th, one of the things that this incoming administration absolutely needed
But
was,
we gave the weapons to Ukraine. We didn't sell it to them. We were selling it to our allies back
yeah.
in World War I. So there's not really any profit. You're kind of right, but I'm just saying. Okay, I have some thoughts with Ukraine, but we don't have that on our table. But go ahead. I'll go ahead and let you. You're the guest. Go ahead.
Sure, I was just saying that, like, I mean, in terms of our country is right now, it's weaker than it's ever been. Our currency has been debased. We are not. We were energy independent. There's a lot of things. But so with regard to January the 6th, because January the 6th, you can't just look at it in and of itself as like this one incident. This was happening during a time when we had the Black Lives Matter protests for the whole summer that year. We had a contested election. We were going through COVID. China's influence was being seen more and more and more. You had just this global weight of national here in the United States awakening to global politics, globalism. So I think, you know, it happened at this time when globalism is really unpopular in and of itself. Like, nobody wants to give up their personal vehicles. I don't think anybody wants to eat bugs. I don't think that people want to have their movements curtailed. And I think that in order to get us to a point where we're voluntarily giving up our liberties, where we're,
Which liberties are we giving up?
well, we gave up our liberties of free movement during COVID for almost 2 years.
Trump's the one that had the mandatory lockdowns for everybody.
Sure, and
Biden
that's what I'm
didn't.
telling you, that I still don't understand his
You left
role.
it up to the states.
I see Trump as a possible Pied Piper that's just playing a role that was given to him by the globalists.
Well, that's the Republican Party right now. They all Trump.
Well, no, not necessarily right now, and we saw it with the divide over Kevin McCarthy becoming speaker. There's an America First contingent, the nationalists, against Kevin McCarthy, which would be like the globalists. The way that Trump backed him, also, you know, I'm very cautiously suspicious of.
But that's the thing I could attack on policy now. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene is America First. She didn't support the price gouging legislation that Biden put out for gas. And that was like a big issue. People with higher gas prices in this country. A way to remedy that was to stop people from raising the price. And you would think Republicans would be like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. None of them did it. That's not American First on policy.
So there's a difference between what I would describe as a uniparty, that's Republicans and Democrats, the traditional GOP, and this America First, the same people that Dan Crenshaw labeled as terrorists. It was fascinating for Tucker Carlson to call him out and say, like, how many Democrats did you ever refer to as terrorists during the Summer of Love or during any of these other? And he couldn't name a time. So January the 6th.
Sorry.
No, it's fine because I do want to focus and really drill in on that day. So or the events of that day. So I went not necessarily because I had been invited by Trump because he said it was going to be wild. I was fascinated by that,
Oh,
but
you were doing a report for an El Paso family that wanted some media coverage, so you went to Washington for them.
yes. And so, I would like to think that I was as an independent of an observer as you can. Do I have my opinions about the election? Absolutely. No question about it. But with that, I wanted to see how it would play out. And I would say this going into it, I know that Mike Pence could have not stopped the certification of the votes, could have legally said, you know what, we need an investigation. We need to pause this for 10 days, which is what most people that went to Washington on those days, they didn't want to go and do it like by force. What they wanted to do was show their support for using this constitutionally mandated I guess solution right to a divided election. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you, some people have said no, Mike Pence doesn't have the authority to do such a thing, but he really did have the authority, and we know that he has the authority because that was part of this omnibus spending bill that was recently passed, was stripping the vice president of the authority to kick back to stop the
Well,
certification
isn't
of
that
election.
like a GOP like battle cry? Take more power away from the federal government.
Sure, but he did have
Just
with
when it
regard to
conveniences y'all guys, you're like, we want the
he
power, but not
wanted
now.
there in theory that day it could have been stopped the count on a constitutional, it could have been legally stopped. There was enough support for it, for the certification to stop and to have an investigation into the legality of the election, which most of it centered around like mail-in ballots and the way that they were being counted, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I think most people were there for. So that's why I don't think
Well,
I
the
wouldn't.
Republican Party wasn't very transparent with that process. I mean, a lot of people that paid a little bit of attention of how the mail-in ballots work. I mean, of course, you're going to have a delay, and there was a big. It was predicted before people started voting. There's going to be a big red initial wave, but then you're going to get some more people that are voting blue with the mail-in ballots because President Trump said, "Don't vote through the mail, vote in person," and that's what they did. So they did what they were told to do by President Trump, and most left-leaning people vote through mail. So it wasn't really, it was a logical conclusion, in my opinion.
Um, there people wanted to have the certification paused. They wanted to present evidence of voter fraud, and the I personally never saw anybody stating that we were going to, the Capitol was going to be stormed, that there was going to be violence inflicted upon anybody else. If I had thought that in going into it, I would have personally not gone, and I would have advised the family, the Halliday family, to do the same.
It's
Hey,
civil
don't.
unrest. It's hard to predict what will happen under civil unrest. It's
But
happening
I
on
don't
both
think
sides.
that I don't think that that's what people were going after. I do know that there was a targeted effort by Antifa, as the document or the article that I shared with you. There, as far as I can tell, there was a targeted effort by Antifa working with anti-Trump leftist unions to infiltrate the
Would you
protests.
call them anti-Trump? I mean, the names is like divisive. Would you just consider them counter protesters? I mean,
No,
anyone that's a counter would be against Trump. I mean, you see counter protesters in when they're having like trans activists going on, or if there's certain other like left-leaning, there's they're anti against what they believe. So I'm just kind of curious, why do you choose anti-Trump? They're just countering against them. They're counter protesters.
Well, so you'll have a link to the article and the set of facts that I've presented to make this argument, right?
Yeah, you
So
said you think that they were given stickers. You think there was an
no, it was
organization.
confirmed.
The guy said they weren't his guys, and then they said there was other
but he
people
did
out there.
acknowledge that there were stickers that were handed out and they were there on the premise, correct? So
Yeah.
so to the viewers that haven't read this article, I'm
And is there if I link it and all that for transparency?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
For sure. Please do. But so I was there on January the 6th. I was there for some of the most violent acts of the day. I captured these on camera. I gave my information to the FBI, and the FBI didn't get back to me for almost like 6 months. After 6 months, they got a hold of me, and I believe that the information that I gave them did lead to at least 2 people being arrested that had been previously cleared under very weird circumstances. So that's kind of January the 6th.
Well, there was that military guy got arrested. I mean, I think one of the things that you said, but he didn't get away. And the only thing I was thinking when I read that, I was like, well, that would be the best way to keep track of him if they let him back into the military. The government's going to know every nook and cranny he's at.
The government wouldn't give you if look. So the individual that we're talking about, his name is James Mault. James Mault. He worked at Ironworkers 6. This is how I helped break some of the case with regards to January the 6th. The key takeaway, my main point here is that anti-Trump union members committed some of the most violent acts of the day. When we talk about a coup, an insurrection, that would go about the way that we would, I think most people would define that, is stopping the government from conducting its duties.
Well, it's a higher person in power influencing the election. I mean,
that's what everybody was saying, that we were stopping the transfer of power, right? That's what
well, Trump didn't go to the transfer of power. He totally avoided it.
James Mault, he went specifically, his mom testified to FBI agents that he had told her he was going there to stop the count. So James Mault, he is a iron worker with a very specific set of skills that went to Washington, D.C. from Buffalo. His dad drove 4 other people there as well. They built there was a large scaffolding that was built that was used to assault DC officers that were holding a line, basically keeping most protesters from really storming the Capitol, from getting up there and being able to reach the representatives that were in there conducting the count. He's the only one so far that the government has evidence that he went to stop the count. Not like most people that I assert went to show support for this notion of a constitutional pausing of the count. There on this, I was able to call. So I left. I was there when things were getting really bad. When police had not yet given. Oh, they had not ceded the ground to the protesters.
Yeah, you said in the interview that the cops still hadn't broke the line. They were still there. Everything was fine. Yep. I think that was one of the things you said. And then you were making connections of like, well, perhaps it broke because of this. You know, you gave your...
Yeah, that is one of the major contributing factors to the line being broken. And then the protesters being able to get in and reach the area. So one, that big thing could not have been built on site. Yes. It was too big for it to be carried on a pickup truck or anything like that. This is why I'm so happy. I'm pleasantly surprised that Kevin McCarthy has agreed to release the 14,000 hours of footage. I will say this. let's bookmark this for the future. I think that if these 14,000 hours are released, one of the things that we're going to find is this union that came there to build this big thing, that this scaffolding,
To
this
escalate the crap hitting
yeah,
the fan. Yeah, I mean, I'm
the,
all for holding people accountable. They did
the
that
whole
and they
reason
took
that
part in the
the stickers, see, and this is where there's coordination between several entities that I think needs to be understood. The reason that these stickers that iron workers were given from all over the country, and why this is important. So iron workers from all over the country, they go to Washington, D.C. Somebody paid for their tickets. Somebody got them hotel rooms. Somebody gave them instructions to build this particular scaffolding. I think this is what this is going to reveal, that this thing was built on site somewhere very near. Capitol Police or somebody, some law enforcement agency was given the call to stand down with regards to that. So then it will lead to a bigger discussion of who gave law enforcement the call to stand down on this particular group.
I mean, here's my conspiracy theory, because pretty much in every civil unrest, there's some kind of saboteur out there to rile the crowd up, to just make everyone lose control. So it keeps us fighting against each other about details that don't really solve systemic issues. We're too busy arguing about it's your fault. No, it's your team's fault. So that's why I really don't really do a lot of analysis of like who's to blame.
Mm-hmm.
You see somebody breaking the law, don't do it. That applies to the George Floyd riots, because there was this guy that before the riots started, he was breaking windows to get people riled up. And then as soon as he finished, he had a black umbrella all in black, so no drones could get his pictures. So I would not doubt, that's my God, I can't, my, what do you call it when you're
disclaimer?
You're not disclaimer. I just have a brain fart right now. My conspiracy, that's my conspiracy theory. As far as like somebody just making a saboteur plot to make everyone riled up, to just
from
get their
your time
emotions to take over. What's up?
From your time with law enforcement, can you confirm that there are agent provocateurs that often infiltrate?
I call those people assholes. I mean, there's people that will rile you up to write you up. I mean, there's ways that get you to break the law. I mean,
so, and it sounds like you're telling me that law enforcement agencies.
I'm not telling you anything. I'm just saying assholes exist everywhere. So any job that you have.
Are you familiar of any instance where law enforcement has posed as agent provocateurs in order to?
No.
Okay. I would suggest, as of this moment right now, I can say this for a fact. There was a group that is receiving some sort of protection from FBI, James Mault, this anti-Trump union group. There are Ray Epps. You know who Ray Epps is? Have you heard of him?
Like I said, I don't really do a detailed analysis of this. I mean, I just have my opinion, but no, I haven't heard of him.
Former Fed who was also embedded. He's the only person that is on camera urging people to go into the Congress. So I think that why this is important. Let's just go here. Why this is important 2 years later is because, one, there is a large segment of the United States populace that is being treated as not only second-class citizens. People have been in jail without going to trial. That's something that the Constitution mandates.
Well, if you're considered and labeled as a terrorist, you lose your rights to trial. And that's what I'm saying. I apply this objectively. If you're doing something, if you're on the left, you do something crazy like this, you play with fire, you get burned. You know, stupid games, you win stupid prizes. I mean, I don't want to sound so heartless, but that's like just being objective. You know, we could talk about like, well, they're good people. Well, that's part of being a person that needs to be more engaged politically. So you know the consequences of your actions too. So you were smart enough. How come you were able to hold yourself and be disciplined and they weren't? So,
you know, I'll tell you what it was. It was honestly, Spirit of God came upon me at that moment. It's like, you need to leave immediately right
behave.
Now.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's like, you know, I do something stupid. And people, go ahead. I'm sorry.
To this day, you know what? I know that that's exactly what it was, because I left at just the right time. I got enough being there. But yes, you know what? At first, I think that I got caught up in a wave of an emotion, and I was like, "Oh, we're storming the Capitol." And then for a few moments, I was riding with that energy, and then I was like, "Hey, wait a second! Nope, nope,
Yeah,
nope, nope."
yeah.
And all I did was point my camera. Then I spent a few days in Washington D.C.
Have you ever been in a fight?
Many fights.
Yeah, I mean, you can see how one could lose control, and that's when you just let your primal side take it control. And we just got to do better of controlling that. And like I keep on saying, when we have these conversations with each other, that's one way to build that discipline. So stuff like this doesn't happen again.
You know, I think this interview right now, it's already groundbreaking in this, that outside of really right wing media, I don't think anybody on the left has even acknowledged the possibility that this could have been a provocateur event, that there could be more than meets the eye. I think it's been very much drilled down that this was
Well, you
Trump.
don't watch the YouTube content creators I watch, and they say a lot of Trump supporters they were taken advantage of due to their ignorance, and they were used. So that's the kind of vibe I have too. I mean, people on the left are used too when you have these SJW people, and they can't articulate their arguments. Like there was like this one women's activist group that was they couldn't even name issues of women, and they were advocating for women. So it was just SJWs that ruined. They don't have good rhetoric. I mean, they don't make good arguments, and that's another thing I advocate for. If you're going to be passionate about something, make sure you go out of your way, do a little bit of research, and develop on your rhetoric skills so you could convince people, or not necessarily I'm trying to convince you, but people that watch us, and they'll be like, okay, he made a good point. I like where this guy's going. I like where this guy's going. I mean, and then the politicians are going to see that, and they're going to lead accordingly because they know we're watching.
Yeah. Well, some politicians.
We'll get
Um,
rid of the ones that are not. That's our fault.
do you think that Katie Hobbs fairly and squarely won her election against Carrie Lake in Arizona?
I think Trump's endorsements have shown throughout the whole country that they sunk a lot of politicians. I
You know, he
mean,
won
Trump was like I mean, he did win some, but majority of the people that he
93%.
endorsed from judges or like from the
93% of
midterms
his
and the
candidates,
midterms
93% of his candidates won.
and the midterms.
Yep.
I don't recall. I just remember saying that a lot of people that lost uh Trump endorsed candidates. That's probably true, maybe. Endorsements.
He lost some major ones.
It said 59 of the 93 Trump endorsed candidates post presidency. So I don't know. I'm just saying I'm not I'm trying to learn. When you say that, I'm like, okay. But no, it seems I mean, I'm not saying I mean, that's still a good win, 59 to 93.
No, I think hold on. Let me find
Yeah.
the
I'll go ahead and share it. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and look for that because I endorsement lists in Arizona, maybe in some states, I think, because that would be a good concession for me to make. 50% of Trump's endorsed candidates won their election so far. Okay. And that was from November 8th, 2018. So I think it just depends on the timing because his polling was pretty bad toward the end. Because to be fair, you know, the economy was doing good, but then the pandemic and his leadership during the pandemic is what killed him. And a lot of people forget that. The one thing I really didn't like about Trump, he always passed the buck. He never took self-accountability. And that's my old right-wing mentality coming out. He's like, he would always blame people, even on his party. He'd fire people. I'm like, dude, it's the buck stops there. It's your fault. You hired them. Why are you firing so many people? And
he made the worst hiring decisions, but I don't.
But that's how he marketed himself as a businessman. He just showed how incompetent he was.
Well, I don't think anybody could have foreseen how bad the swamp really is.
He said he sold us on him being the guy who can negotiate and doing it. I mean,
yeah, I don't think he's the guy. I want to be on record. I think Ron DeSantis is definitely going to
I
be.
think he would do a lot better job. I would definitely concede to that. But I mean, right now, I guess we'll just go ahead and publicize.
I sent you on Twitter the
Cool. Sweet. I'll go ahead and look at it. I'll share it right now so we can just have it up there. All right. Okay, control of Congress. Oh yeah, Congress, 49 plus minus one, winning. Yeah, the Republicans kicked button, the Congress. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
Trump had a total of 235 endorsements, of which 219 won.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, because they lost the Senate. But dude, they should have won both, because that's usually the chain of events. The one party gets elected in the White House, and the other party wins in the midterms big. So they lost the Senate, and they had it, and But anyways, but yeah, you're right.
I'm gonna have to go pretty soon, but I do want to I'd like to talk about maybe some points that we can meet,
Sure.
like some common ground that we could share.
Sure.
Do you think that do you believe in the constitutional right to free speech and the limits on government being able to stop things from being published?
I think most people don't even know what their free speech is. I mean, the only thing free speech is the government can't go after you. It's not about you talking on Twitter. You're not getting your free speech taken from you. If Elon says, don't want to see you, that's not your protected speech. That's a business right to do that when you sign the terms of agreement. It's just that Uncle Sam's not coming after you.
Sure, but when the FBI put specific pressure on Twitter to silence both people that had issues with the 2020 elections and people that did not support the main COVID narrative, they paid $3.6 million. So Twitter files, there's a lot in there. But would you say this? Do you think that do you agree that one, there is a constitutional law that says that the government, well, there's a precedent that says the government cannot stop things from being published. They don't have the authority to either compel speech or to stop speech from happening?
Well, you can't do certain things under the First Amendment. You can't push narratives that are violent toward others. And I imagine there's some interpretations. I can't remember every aspect of. I know hate speech is not considered, a violation, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there was some probably certain things because it involved public health, and no one knew the answers, and people trying to push division could, be infringing on some people's well-being on a mass scale. So I imagine there's some Supreme Court judge that could probably articulate why they were justified to do what they did. I mean, Trump took advantage of it. Biden probably did too. I mean, when you have to govern a whole country, I mean, it's not going to be something that you could just paint individual areas where you could just take care of somebody's interest here and then somebody else's interest here. You have to fix stuff in a mass scale. And just some people are not going to like the fact that they're being forced because they politicized the vaccine. If they would have just been like, you know what, this is what we got ahead of us. We got to work together. We know there's some people out there with some conditions that might be bad with the combination of this vaccine. We respect that, but they weren't like that. They were telling us we need masks. We don't need masks. It was a massive screw up because first they didn't know if they had the resources because Trump gave a lot of resources to China. So we didn't know we had enough here in the United States. So it was just a hot mess and they could have done a lot better. And I think when Biden came into power, he normalized the outcome. He allowed the states to handle it. So right there is a better
but there was a federal mandate for government employees to
the military. That's another thing. If the military is doing it, what's the incentive of killing off your troops? I mean, they want them to be battle ready, not get sick with a super contagious disease to take out a lot of the ground troops.
So close.
So to me, it's just like, I don't know. I don't think if you think they would want to take out the military to maintain their power?
I think Joe Biden is absolutely a Chinese agent. I think that he is fulfilling his role right now to weakening America. Absolutely.
Because India right now is trying to prevent China from their ambitions. They have a strategy that's called the diamond necklace that get choke points around China, because China does the same thing to India. And India's allied with the United States right now because that's what leads into Ukraine. Because I feel like that's what the United States is doing with Russia, because Russia, who their buddy is China. So I really don't think Biden's buddies with China if they're, bullying Russia around.
Well, I mean, he was silent on the abuse, the human slavery issue with the Uyghurs. Absolutely refused to call him out on it.
No, no one's
Uh,
going to call out China because all these corporations have all their businesses down there. They exploit the labor. Like when we had a conversation about Mexico, I think the number one reason why people take advantage of the situation in the borders because of the labor that comes from that side. And now we've, with the pandemic, there's more migration coming where there's opportunity. And, you have all these Republicans, oh, we have all these jobs. No one's taking all these jobs. Well, there's people coming to work now. So.
yeah, but um, there's people that are coming to work. I mean, I could see that when I spent time in the migrant camps. But do you know about the Venezuelan prisons that were emptied and had all their people sent up to America during
That wouldn't
this?
surprise me. That's like unburdening their prison system and giving it to us. I mean, look what we did to them. So they're like, well, now they could deal with this. I mean, we had sanctions over there, so it's payback, I guess. I'm not saying it's right, but
It's kind of hypocritical that they were letting in Venezuelans, some that had just come from prison, but they were keeping out Cubans because Cubans had been already exposed to a communist system, know that it's not something that they're interested in. But that's a whole different topic. I do think that he is debasing our currency. This war in Ukraine is definitely unsustainable. We're not spending on ourselves. We are
so you
importing.
want to spend, you want government spending in this country.
No, what I would like is I would like a return to the days where we were able to drill our own oil, produce all of our own energy. I would really like a return to the days when
Corporations were taxed like almost 90%, like in Eisenhower.
no, no, not
Government funded
necessarily.
all 95% of the infrastructure.
I think with regards to that, the whole philanthropic system definitely needs to be reformed. There's no reason why Bill Gates is able to give these huge tax write-offs to himself via the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then make
Trump
that.
made that happen more possible.
Oh, I am telling you, I think Trump could very well be a Pied Piper. I'm not against that notion, and I think that that leads up to a lot of other bigger
And I'm kind of
questions.
curious if those American First politicians voted for all that stuff to happen too.
At the end of the day, they I think the major thing was that it only takes one person to call into question to oppose the speaker, and they would go into there's a mechanism to have them removed with only one. It was at first they were at five members that needed to come together, but at one, I think it's interesting. We'll see what's going to happen with that. You heard about the weaponization of the federal government committee?
No, how's that affect me?
Do you know what the church committee of the 1970s is?
No, how's that affect me?
Well, it affects you in this way that the government often uses mind control techniques. You have to go back and look at the church committee of the 1970s. But basically, our behavior is coerced through different forms and means, and the government has, in other countries, has fomented unrest that has brought to power selected candidates. And I think that there's a system that has been perfected overseas. January the 6th is one of these things that will come back to this.
Well, that's going to work on people that don't think critically. And that's up to us to hold them accountable. That's
Sure.
again, I'm not going to blame all the people that are in power to maintain their power. I mean, they have their bottom line. They can't see themselves working a 9-to-5 job like us. This is all they know. They're out of touch. This is all they do. So to maintain that power is the only thing, the only roadmap they have. And the only way we could change and make a detour is becoming more engaged and critical thinkers, us.
Yep. But we have to know and understand what's being perpetrated against us in order to even be able to
We're not
formulate.
getting a return on our investment via our taxes. I don't mind paying taxes as long as I get what I want in return on my investment.
Well, I think this that one when you're filling the country up with immigrants from other countries that are going to become dependent on the system, that's going to one it's a lot more taxes that people that have jobs are going to be penalized.
Mhm.
It's going to bring wages down, not upwards, because now there's this huge supply of people that are willing to work for next to nothing.
Well, make it easier for them to become a citizen because when you have an influx of immigrants, our economy has gotten better. They're not able to work because of their papers. They're probably willing to work and they're still paying taxes by sales tax. And if they come to here and their visas expire, they're probably still getting paid and taxed. So they're contributing. But I'm like, I 100% agree with you. There's some people that are not like the productive type. And I can give you a story because I have some family in El Paso, and one of my cousins, she attended the university down there, and she was like saying, "Man, everyone was asking me why don't you have a nice car?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, all these people they have dual citizenship, and they always drive in BMWs and all that." And I'm like, "Okay, so what's?" She goes, "But the thing is, they claim their income in Mexico, and they kind of work at a McDonald's just so they can get that status." And but they're really wealthy. Oh, they claim their income in the United States, but they don't claim their income in Mexico, where they're very well off. So there's
Yeah.
people that take advantage of the system, and I'm aware of that. But I think for the most part, people that are poor that come across that are looking for opportunity, yeah, I mean, we're going to educate their kids. That's one way because here in Texas, there's a whole bunch of houses getting built. A lot of Latinos are doing that. And there's so much going down as far as development is concerned. I'm just like blown away. I'm like, this is the perfect exploitation right here. You could just make them have all uh what's the word? Contract jobs, not contract jobs, but like there's a oh goodness, I forgot. Like Uber drivers, I just lost my train of thought, but the gig economy. So that's a perfect people to exploit for a gig economy. They don't get benefits, they just get a paycheck and that's it.
It's called a permanent underclass, and unfortunately, the permanent underclass is going to vote Democrat because they remember this was the last time that we talked. They feel they were invited by Joe Biden.
Well, I don't
Joe
know
Biden.
about that. A lot of Latinos are conservative, man. A lot of them. Trump was able to turn a
One,
lot of
the
Latinos
ones that
red.
are here, but we're talking about the immigrants. We're talking about the ones that heard Joe Biden say that as soon as I get elected, come search the border. That's the people that we have here. And I've gone through and I've talked to people, not just in El Paso, in Tijuana. I've been doing this for several years now, and they do feel that one, they were invited here, they're gonna vote Democrat, and which is
And the Democrats aren't always nice to immigrants. Obama was the deporter in chief, so they handle the issue if it gets too crazy. I mean, you think Joe Biden's not going to be trigger happy to deport people?
but
I think he will.
they're not exposed to a different viewpoint, which is you again. I think Joe Biden has, by virtue of open borders, by stopping our energy independence, by devaluing our currency, by giving our weapons and money to Ukraine, and our right now our strategic oil reserves are depleted to a level they've never been this low. I mean, honestly, if you were a country that was going to invade another country or was going to declare war, these are the times when you would do such a thing. When the worst part about it is that our populace is so divided against ourselves. When one group looks at another as domestic terrorists, and I'll tell you, and I think that's one of the
Wow.
differences right now between
There's some
Democrats
hyperbolic titles given to each side. I mean,
but
that's
here's the difference. Here's one thing that I see the difference. I think that most conservatives, our ire is focused on people in Congress. It's focused on the people that are running the show. I think that the Democrats, what they're doing is that they're focusing all the ire on the people that have this political ideology. And there's a lot of examples. I'll tell you, the FBI was intentionally padding their statistics for domestic domestic terrorism, calling things that were not domestic terrorism that, in order to justify spending all of their time on that instead of the things that traditionally they would be protecting the country from: cyber attacks, from transnational criminal activity, things of that nature. All that shit's gone out the window. Now they're focused on parents going to school boards opposing this trans agenda.
That seems more relevant to people on the right. I never hear. I mean, the right introduces that, and then the left responds to that. So it always seems like
the President Biden he wrote a letter to the Department of Justice, instructed them to put special attention to parents that were going to school board meetings, that they didn't want their children exposed to these things. I mean, we're living in some interesting times. I think stuff that we have coming up in the near future is that pedophilia, the attempt to legalize, normalize, and make pedophilia acceptable to the general public. That's one of the.
I mean, well, that's one thing I could talk about with policy. The Republicans are not wanting to codify the age of consent. So it's just like.
What do you mean? I think the age of consent is 18, and that's pretty well.
It depends on the states. There's some where it's 17, and there's some other. I think there might be some at 16 at some states.
Sure,
just like the federal codification of it, like, and to make sure it happens in states as well.
Yeah, there are some states that they allow, and I think what the law is that
in Texas it's 17.
It's 17.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just like their rhetoric doesn't match their actions. So it's just like, where were they when they were having those beauty pageants for little girls? But now it's trans kids. They're like, I have the moral high ground. The thing is, people need to talk about it, because there's people in the trans community that will agree with you. They'll say that's inappropriate behavior. Don't do it. Yeah. If you're going to transition, fully transition. Don't partially transition. They didn't expect people to call you a girl when you still have a beard. So there's disagreements in the trans community, and I don't think that is getting enough attention.
Yeah, there's the Gays Against Groomers whole movement. It's fascinating. I mean, we could sit and talk about it all day long.
Yeah, but, and I think for the most part, the majority of Americans, gay, straight, they're against that. And I think most people would, give an ear to a reasonable argument. But that's not allowed or permitted with the mainstream media. They want to always make us look like we're fighting.
With the case of the dean of students at that Chicago school that was giving butt plugs to his students.
Yeah.
And then there was I feel like there was a coordinated effort by the administrators to take his side, even though clearly, like, parents hadn't known that this was going on.
Well, actually, the parents supported it, because I looked in that article that you sent. The parents were blaming it on right-wing rhetoric. And my takeaway after I read it, I was like, okay, they have sex ed for straight kids. And I was like, well, he even said this is about gay, stuff. So I'm assuming he's giving that education to the homosexual demographic. So it looked like it was supported by the parents. And I don't have gay kids, but if I did, I don't think I would mind that. I mean,
but wouldn't you be sending your kids to school to learn, like, math?
Well, sex ed is something they do in the schools. I mean, are you against sex education? You don't have to put your kid.
No, I'm not against sex ed as a subject. I'm against sex ed as a unifying theme of education, which is where we're at right now.
Well, it was a sex ed class, but it was
right now all of education is being viewed in this. Some people will affectionately call it global homo. Some people will call it like the BIPOC / DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there is this real big movement afoot with this regard of with this idea of the Overton window of what is acceptable speech and what is not. There is a real big movement right now to log down what is acceptable speech with regards to sexuality.
I think for the most part, most things are acceptable. It's just how you say it. If you can't use a rhetoric that sounds like you're curious and you're genuine, you wanted to learn, or you want to, if you want to challenge another viewpoint, I think both sides are probably guilty. It's like if you just call someone a groomer, but yet you're wanting to question their integrity, if you go into a conversation with that kind of terminology, you're going to butt heads. So, I think if people are able to be more disciplined with their rhetoric, they could have tougher conversations, because it should be the job of somebody else that doesn't believe what you believe to make a good argument to, persuade you. But most people just get too frustrated and they just want to call each other the lowest, life forms. Like you believe in Satan. I've been called a communist. I've been called like devil worshiper or Satanist. I'm like, okay, dude, no, I'm not. To be honest, all I think is like, if I had a kid that was homosexual, I would do what I needed to do to make sure they're not going to be victimized by their environment. If they need to have like education with being a gay guy, having sex, how am I going to be able to show them that? And I have an experience that I would like to share, and I guess we could close things up. When I was younger, I went to Mexico City and I was partying, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna meet some ladies. So I wanted to go do the responsible thing and get stuff. And when I went to go buy stuff, they're like, well, you need lube. And I was like, no, I don't. And I was like, I didn't know about that stuff. And then so I finally, in retrospect, I started thinking, I was like, oh, they probably thought I was going to go with a dude or something. I didn't know about that stuff. So I'm like, okay, if you don't know that stuff and if you are gay, you probably need to know that that's stuff you need to do. I would not be able to give that information to my kid if I had to like educate them. So
Sure, but I think what a lot of people, such as myself, feel is that it's not a teacher's job to educate my kids about that sort of thing.
They don't have to attend it. It's like you sign a paper. If you want them to go, they go. Has that not been your experience?
No, it's not been in my experience. No, I recently found out, well, about a year ago, that there was a book, and I think we've you've seen the book, you know which book, but that there was a book with depictions of homosexual sex
in a middle school, or high school,
available in my kids' middle school library. I was really that I was shocked. You know what? I think no, there was no permission slip. There was nothing that let us know.
No, hey, I'm right there with you. I don't think that's appropriate material. After you shared that, I was like, yeah, you would have the right. And I think that would be a legitimate concern. But like for high school kids and sex education, I got that. My parents are like, oh, yeah, that's the time. Okay, don't giggle and don't make a smart ass out of yourself. So now that we've been like out of the closet now, more gays are going to be more open. So they're going to want to know. And if their parents are heterosexual like me, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to give that conversation that they need to, answer their questions. I wouldn't know how to talk. I would be like an idiot.
Well, sure, but there should be, in what we're doing right now, there should be a reasoned discussion about what's acceptable, what not, how to apply this. I think in school districts, in schools in general, strong parent-teacher association, strong, like just parent association. Yeah. This is the problem that I've had with the Biden administration, with where we're at right now, is that FBI resources were dedicated towards targeting parents who had this notion, who said, no, we want to know what our kids are being exposed to. We don't agree with these things being available. And going to these parent-teacher conferences or school board meetings, that's the time traditionally where this is what's fought out, right? Where we talked about it as a community, we came to a consensus, and then that when you have the FBI coming in and literally having helicopters circling above, it's painting out, it's making people such as myself seem as like extremists, as unreasonable.
Well, you don't know. You represent you. Other people that share your ideas made the whole, because I've seen some of those videos of right-leaning people go to those parent-teacher meetings, and they were cringe. They were like, and I was like, well, no one's going to take you seriously. And if one of them, like you just said, that example, I'm pretty sure people in the homosexual community, trans community, they're like, yeah, man, even a straight person doing that stuff, it's not appropriate in middle school. So, but people don't compose themselves like that. And then the media will only show the footage of the cringiest people making those cases. And to be honest, I mean, the clips I saw of conservatives addressing their concerns in school meetings like that, it was really like hyperbolic. And I'm like, and it wasn't showing a good example like you presented to me.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think with regards to common ground, even being able to have the discussions first and foremost, being able to find fair moderators, finding way avenues that things aren't automatically just shifted to, oh, you can't say that, that's an unacceptable viewpoint and thought. I think that's going to go a long ways. Realizing, with regards to January the 6th, I think this is my closing thought, and what I'd like to leave with this is that
Sure.
that event represented a big divide in the way that the citizens viewed each other. I think it was one of the first times that people really were sold on this notion of domestic terrorists lurking. I think people really did believe that there was networks of people coast to coast who were
There
ready
was
to.
the Proud Boys was like a network to kick some ass. I mean, that's kind of like terrorizing to people. So there's
Well,
been footage of like them being the aggressors, but at the same time, Antifa's no saint.
well, right now their trial is going on, so like at this point, the facts of the cases are being heard. And I mean, it's interesting. There was a lot of FBI people that were embedded with them.
Well, it's a
So
federal concern. I mean, they're probably implement it. I mean, I don't think law enforcement is going to be like, okay, let's not go in the crowd and make sure we see what's going on. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
the double standard between the Proud Boys and Antifa during the Summer of Love, though, cannot be
What's the Summer of
understood.
Love? The George Floyd or
Yeah,
all the riots?
all of
And then
all of
that's
the
another
riots.
thing that I don't really agree with the right on this. They always like to make it look like that's a Democratic or a left leaning. I know there's some politicians that kind of like, well, they deserve to be, but a lot of those people that were doing that were apolitical, I feel. I don't think any of them were like, yeah, we're going to vote for Joe Biden. They just wanted to burn it all down. It was civil unrest. And I think a lot of that emotion was also in January 6th. It's just people that were frustrated being ignored. And that's what happens. People get emotional.
I think their Antifa is actually an organized group that pretends to be organic, is actually funded um, with the same in the same vein as the color revolution that happened in China. Um, I think that, and maybe we'll talk about this on a separate podcast.
Sure.
I So Antifa was supposed to invade El Paso. This was right before there was the Walmart shooting of 2019. It is super fascinating, but I have very, very strong suspicions that the Department of Justice, people within rogue elements of the United States government actually fund and are behind everything that Antifa does. And I'll present more evidence of, but I think one great starting point. I think you reviewed the article that I had sent you about January the 6th. I think we can both agree that one, there was a certain individual that was very early on identified as somebody who committed violent acts that day. And
Sure.
we can agree that he escaped charges for a good 5 or 6 months, and he was
Well, he
allowed.
wasn't charged. And when he got charged, he was put in jail. They found him because he went back to the military.
But it wasn't his arrest didn't happen until like 6 months later, and the timing seemed to correlate with my phone call with a completely separate agency, right? I think that's
Yeah. Well, if you contribute to his guilt, awesome. Good for you. He needs to be held accountable.
yeah, well, he needs to be held accountable, but his role in it, I think, needs to be made clear. Not that this was somebody that went in there, was a Trump supporter that went in there to help his cause. No, he went
That's a
in.
separate case. I mean, that's how you got to look at them on an individual basis. That guy deserves his day in court and be judged accordingly. And the Trump people that just followed it and act responsible like you, they got to get their consequences and
Sure.
their fair day in court. That's
But I think it's important to acknowledge that there was organized efforts, not by Trump people, but people not aligned with Trump, to stop the count. And they were in fact successful. And so this notion of insurrection, well, the government has not been able to prove its case directly that any Trump supporters participated or carried out any acts that can be considered that. I think that indirectly the government already proved that, one, in my research and NBC News and all of that, I think it has been proven that there was individuals that did specifically go to stop the count, and they were protected by the FBI at least for a certain amount of time until a separate agent, a separate arm of the agency came in and made the arrest.
Yeah, it's a hot mess, man. It's going to be crazy. And I don't think Trump did a very good job to make sure it stayed civil. And I'm not going to accuse him for doing anything crazy as far as like contributing to what happened. Like you said, there's so much footage that needs to get released. So I could just wait until all that comes out. And I think that's the best way to go about things. But as far as like people breaking the law, you just got to look at it in an individual basis. I mean, everyone has their day in court. And unfortunately, when you do something like that, it's like a crime that you commit in the airport. You know, it's a federal offense. It's going to be charges that are going to be a little bit upscaled. And
Yep.
you got to know that, man. You got to know that. I mean, there's some Americans that got that mentality of their privilege, and they go to other countries and they act like people that have no consequences until they learn the hard way. So,
With regards to January the 6th, the FBI and the way that the FBI usually does things, the way that they usually build their cases is that they'll arrest small people,
they're going
get
to make
them,
an example of them. I know.
and then they'll use the information gained from them to go up and see how do these dots connect. I think right now we have a really interesting example of them doing the exact opposite of shutting down this investigation of how do these dots connect. I'd really love to know, and I think anybody that is
I can
really
give you the answer. They don't afford. They can't afford the best lawyers like the politicians that pushed them into doing it. You know, people that got better lawyers are going to not get the consequences. Unfortunately, they're going to be
it could be
pawns.
either that or it could come back to people aligned with intelligence agencies, the Democrat Party that wanted this January the 6th.
That too, but you need a good lawyer, and they don't have access to that.
For sure. Emilio, all right, well, I'm gonna run. Thank you so
All right.
much.
No problem. Good talk, man. Have a
Good
good one.
talk. You too.